Okay, it says it's recording on my end, so I'll go ahead and kick things off. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for coming to today's webinar. My name is Shyla Davison, and I am the Education and Outreach Coordinator for iDigBio. Before we begin, I would just like to take a few minutes to talk about iDigBio and the work we still have going on. As many of you know, iDigBio will officially conclude in 2026. For the past 15 years, iDigBio has had an incredible impact, supporting research, collaboration, and innovation on a national scale. This isn't a moment of sadness, but one of transition. And we're proud to pass the torch to the broader community, confident that the mission of advancing biodiversity digitization and discovery will continue in capable hands. So, before we dive in, let me give a quick overview of who we are, what our mission has been, and the excited work still happening. iDigBio began 15 years ago with the support of the National Science Foundation and the vision of its founding leaders. Over that time, we've made tremendous strides together as a community, and our shared efforts have shaped the future of biodiversity research. At its heart, iDigBio works to make biodiversity specimen data widely available and useful through digitization, training, open access, and creative new applications. And while iDigBio as a project will eventually close, our mission and the data the community has gathered will live on. Thanks to the contributions from more than 1,000 biodiversity collections across 350 institutions in the US, the iDigBio portal now hosts nearly 150 million specimen records and 65 million media files across 2,000 datasets. These data will remain available long after iDigBio, continuing to serve researchers, educators, students, and the public. And we're not done yet. As we move towards the conclusion of the project, we still have new initiatives on the horizon. And this is an outdated slide. We've actually added more webinars for the future. So we're excited about that. One of the new initiatives is this webinar series, which highlights protocols, practices, and strategies for ensuring the long-term continuations of collections digitization and data mobilization. The collections community is well positioned to sustain this important work, and we're excited to support this transition. So as we look ahead, today's presentation will focus on the most important parts of this transition. With more than 148 million specimen records aggregated, iDigBio has long served as the national hub for natural history collections in the United States. As the project enters its final year of funding, the questions on many people's mind is how to ensure these data remain accessible and useful. So our speakers will walk us through several pathways forward for both data providers and data users, highlight how the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, or GBIF, can support long-term access. Since approximately 90% of the data in iDigBio are already in GBIF, the pathway is already familiar and straightforward, but we hope today's session will provide clarity and confidence as we work towards sustaining long-term access to the data. So before I hand things over, just a quick reminder, as with all iDigBio webinars, the chat and mic functions will be disabled. Please post your questions in the Q&A feature, and we'll get to as many as time allows in the end. So thank you for your understanding. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speakers, Marie from GBIF and Caitlin, or Kat. Kat is our designated data wrangler. So I am so excited to have introduced Kat. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and hand things over to her. Good to go.
Right, perfect. Okay, let me just, I could have staged everything for screen sharing while you were speaking, but I didn't, so let me do that. All right, got like a multi-monitor setup, so just bear with me here. All righty. All right, can y'all confirm that you're seeing, all right, not seeing my speaker notes? Perfect, good, no speaker notes, don't want anyone to see that. All right, well, without further ado, we'll get started. So Shyla, you stole most of my my introduction, honestly, but my name's Kat Chapman. I'm iDigBio's Biodiversity Informatics Coordinator, or as I prefer to call it, the Data Wrangler. And I'm here to talk a little bit about how to ensure that your data stay online and visible in online, visible, and usable in a post-iDigBio world. Okay, my arrow keys don't want to work. That's fine. Okay. So I don't want to believe it either, but it's true. iDigBio is coming to an end. Since its inception some 15 years ago, we've managed to aggregate and serve about 150 million digitized specimen records from around 2,000 record sets. This is so much data and so much work and so much science represented by this, honestly, a labor of love. Call me sentimental, but I believe it to be true. So please enjoy this stock image result for sad and pensive. I thought it was nice. So the plug is going to be pulled. The lights will turn off. Where do we go from here? Was all of this for nothing? What was the point? After iDigBio, are we going to have to go back to the old ways of sharing biodiversity data, disjointed portals of data, lots of back and forth emails asking curators from faraway institutions about data on a certain taxa or specimen you're interested in and hoping you get a response? Is that where we're going back? No, of course not. Of course it wasn't for nothing. The effort continues because if we human beings have anything, it's the audacity. And as much as I would personally love for iDigBio to be around forever, perpetually funded, a permanent fixture of, say, the Library of Congress, reality compels us to adapt and to overcome. We have to see this as a new era, I think, an opportunity, a new chapter in the world of biodiversity informatics. So with that in mind, I would like to hype up our good friends, known as GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, which Shiloh already introduced, but I am introducing them again because they're worth introducing as many times as we need. They've been here the whole time, and to swallow my pride here a bit, they're the way forward in a post-iDigBio world. But oh gosh, surely you're thinking, great, all of this work to get our data to iDigBio, and now that's going away. We have to do this all over again. Why? What did we do to deserve this Sisyphean task? We're pushing the boulder up a hill. It's rolling back down. We have to do it again and again and again. Why do we deserve any of this? I know, it sounds like it might be a lot of work. I promise you it's doable. So there are a few steps that I'm going to very briefly outline. And after my slides, Marie Grosjean, who is from GBIF, if you were there for Shiloh's introduction, will speak towards GBIF side of things in a bit more detail. But the short version from me is that the primary thing that you need to confirm before publishing data to GBIF is to make sure that you are registered, so to speak, as a publisher with GBIF. This is also called requesting an endorsement as a publisher with GBIF. And I know it sounds like really, really formal, very serious, maybe like a lot of work. It's complicated, but I promise it's not. It's not scary. It's not particularly difficult. And this URL here gives a pretty good overview of what that process looks like. It's collections management software agnostic. It's very general. And I can paste that into the chat after I'm done with my slides, or one of my co-panelists can paste it in the chat if, well, they would have to manually type it out. I'll make sure it's in the chat for you. And then another thing is you might not need to do anything at all. So if you have been the recipient of an email in the past few years from me, an email that, in my opinion, was lovingly nagging you to get your data into GBIF, and you were wonderful and beautiful and amazing enough to reply to me and to work with me, maybe work with people in the Symbiotic Support Hub, you might already have your data on GBIF, in which case, amazing, I love you, you're perfect. And on that note, if your data are in a Symbiotic portal or an IPT installation, chances are actually pretty good that the data are already in GBIF. And if they're not, it's relatively simple to get them pushed to GBIF. But don't take my word for it, please. Please check, make sure. Don't just assume your data are on GBIF. So the publisher search page, which I've linked to here, is a great place to start. And on that note, as of recent estimates, again, Shiloh, steal my thunder here. Some 98% of US-based collections data served by iDigBio. So these are data from institutions based in the United States, regardless of where the specimens themselves were collected. That makes sense? So 98% of these data, as an estimate, are already being served by GBIF. So I'm going to take this moment to say thank you, an immense thank you to those of you who have worked with me on this data parity effort over the last few years. I really, really appreciate it. In any case, if you're having anxieties or concerns or anything, please don't fret. GBIF do not bite, I promise. Neither do GBIF node staff, which I guess this is a good opportunity as any to announce that I'm now officially part of the US node of GBIF. I've even got a cool little t-shirt. So unfortunately, I want to make a joke about I have another hat to wear, but I don't have a hat, just have the shirt. But hooray, this also means that you're not getting rid of me so easily, and my nagging emails will never stop. They will never stop. Seriously though, I want to make this like super duper clear. When in doubt, like any questions you have about just any sort of GBIF, any of the procedures or data publishing, or even just, how do I use the IPT, the help desk are amazing. They're so helpful, they're responsive, there's no question yeah, I see you, Marie. There is no question that's too simple or too complex. Like they will pull out all the stops to help you. And you can ping me too. Though my public email address might change in a post iDigBio world. We'll see how that goes. I will keep y'all updated, of course. It's a conversation for another time, I suppose. Oh, and before it leaves my brain space, the really nice thing about setting up a data linkage to GBIF is provided the data stay in the same place, say in the same data portal, once you set up this linkage and start pushing data to GBIF, it's set it and forget it. As long as the data stay in the same place, and I'm sure Marie will speak more on this in her section. So, okay, right, how do we get the data to GBIF? All this talk about requesting, endorsement, publishing, and just minutiae, and even waxing philosophical, but how do we do it? So I'm going to touch really briefly, because if I went into all of the tiny details of how to do it from each major CMS, we'd be here all day. And frankly, I lack the time and perhaps the expertise to get into every single detail for every single piece of software. Excuse me. So we'll just brief overview. So Symbiota, probably one of the easier collection management software platforms to get data to GBIF from. My humble opinion, that is not at all formed by a decade plus of experience in this field. So again, if you've been one of the lucky recipients of one of my get your data into GBIF emails, you've probably seen some details about this. Relatively little work is required on your end, maybe a little bit of the bureaucracy of requesting endorsement, registering as a publisher. The Symbiota Support Hub, they're also really, really helpful and happy to help with this. And this URL here, again, if the URLs are not in the chat, I will put them in after my slides are done. It's a pretty good resource, a Symbiota specific resource on requesting endorsement and setting up for publication. Specify, another major platform, in my experience, is a little bit more involved, but the Specify Collections Consortium, also happy to work with you if you're utilizing the Collections Consortium to get your data exported and published to an aggregator such as GBIF. So this URL here points to some documentation that, as far as I can tell, explains how to export your data specifically for a data aggregator, but it is members only for members of the Specify Collections Consortium. So there is that, seems to be pretty specific for consortium members. But presumably, if you're using Specify on the consortium, you'll be able to access this. So this seems like a good resource. If you're using an IPT, congratulations. This is probably the easiest way to get data to GBIF. It is GBIF. It's literally their tool. They built it. It's a very useful piece of software. So if you have an IPT that's online, publicly visible, you can link it to GBIF if it isn't already. You will, or you may, or you will have to request endorsement still, but all of these steps are pretty straightforward. I run an IPT on my home server just in test mode for data diagnostics, and I can speak personally as to how relatively simple it is to set up and maintain and update. It's just a Docker container. Or at least that's what I use. It's great. Love the IPT. And again, the GBIF help desk, if you have any questions about IPT, they're like super, super helpful and happy to answer any of your questions, no matter how simple or complicated. Maybe you're using something else for your CMS. Maybe you're using Emu or FileMaker or Excel. Please don't use Excel, but or maybe Arctos. But if I remember correctly, Arctos and VertNet have a special relationship. So if you're using Arctos, just chat with Dave Bloom. He's also amazing, and he'll help you out. Or maybe you're using some fancy bespoke software, which I'm sure is beautiful and wonderful, but it just doesn't push to GBIF. Consider an IPT. Consider setting one up. Again, I've set one up before on just a home server running on my local internet, but I really like it. It's useful even just in test mode for data diagnostics, so to speak. Yeah, IPT, love it. It's great. And honestly, that's all on my part. Thank you for bearing with me. And so I'm now going to hand it off to Marie, and she's going to speak more from a GBIF perspective. And then after that, hopefully we will have plenty of time for whatever questions and concerns or maybe bad jokes that you would like to share with us. So thank you. And Marie, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Kat. That's great, actually. Some of my slides echo back to your slides, so I think we'll have a lot of continuity here. Great. So hello, everyone. My name is Marie Grosjean. I'm a data administrator at the GBIF Secretariat and part of the help desk team that Kat is singing praises of. And today I'll talk to you a little bit about GBIF and how to share data on GBIF, which already Kat has mentioned a bit, and yeah, what you can get out of sharing data on GBIF. So yeah, do you see my slides okay in presenter mode? Yeah, great. So by the way, this image is one of the images that are published by iDigBio to GBIF for I think the Florida collection, I want to say, America National Shell Museum. Yeah. So I only have a very extremely brief introduction to GBIF because I assume most of you are already somewhat familiar, and I'll talk a little bit more about GBIF during my presentation. But yes, basically GBIF is a whole network that comes together to make open data, biodiversity data available to all. It's not just, museum collections. We all have a lot of observations, a lot of data that comes from citizen science, and also a lot more eDNA data. But yeah, it's a big network. We have a lot of country participating. We have a lot of data sets published, and we have a lot of institutions publishing data sets. And our main sort of currency is occurrence records. So occurrence is what you would consider a specimen record in terms of, let's say, natural history collections. So I'm basing my presentation a little bit on that diagram about the GBIF data life cycle, and I'll talk a little bit about different stages of that diagram. But the first one is when you share data on GBIF, how to do it, and what are the different ways you can do it. And this is more on the institution side. So as setting up the landscape, I'm going to explain a little bit the types of entities you have on GBIF. So we have nodes, often they're country nodes, but not only, we also have participant nodes like iDigBio, which is currently a node on GBIF. And they can endorse organizations. So typically you would have a university, a museum, or a citizen science organization, for example. And those organizations, those institutions, they own data sets. And the data set is just a grouping of records. And we have several data set types, but I won't go into details unless people have questions. And the organization can also host an installation. And those data sets are hosted on that installation. And an installation would be typically the IPT that Kat mentioned, but it can be other systems as well. And I'll go back to that. And yeah, the hosting organization doesn't have to be the same as the organization that owns and publishes the data sets, but for the sake of simplicity, it's the same one here. And then this installation publishes the records on GBIF. But it's a little bit more than that. And I'll explain that now. Kat already mentioned that the first step to publishing data on GBIF is to register as a data publisher. So we just have this form that you have to fill in, and then once you're registered, you'll have to wait for a confirmation of endorsement that will come from the national nodes of the country you're in, or it can be also, we have a committee that endorses publishers in countries that may not have a national node. And yeah, you can check if you're already registered as a publisher here with this URL. You can go to gbif.org and look at the publisher tab. Yeah. So once you're registered as a publisher, the next steps is to format your data either as a Darwin Core archive, or you can also have other formats that I won't go in details for. And then find the place to host your data. It must be online and available and accessible to all. And then you need to register your data on GBIF. And that means we need the system to know where your data lives so that we can harvest it. And basically, most publishing tools you may use will help you do the three of those at the same time. So typically, we have the IPT, short for Integrated Publishing Toolkit, which is a tool, a software developed and maintained by GBIF. And that tool will help you format your data as Darwin Core archives. We'll put it online for it to be available for GBIF, and we'll register it on GBIF. And Kat mentioned you can have an IPT in test mode. So you can have a test IPT to test formatting your data, or you can also have it in production mode and publish on GBIF. Institutions can install and host their own IPTs, but you don't necessarily have to host your own IPT if you don't want to. The US, for example, has an IPT where you can request an account. It's at the discretion of the US node, so you have to contact them directly, but there are other options out there if you cannot host your own installation. And this is just a screenshot of how the IPT interface looks like if you're unfamiliar with it. But Kat also mentioned that you can publish on GBIF from collection management systems. So I don't have a full overview of all the collection management systems that exist out there, but I'm mentioning some that can export your data as Darwin Core archives, so they can format your data. And a lot of them can also put those data online so that they're available. So this is the case for, I think, all of those, Symbiota, Earthcape, Specify, and TaxonWorks. They can, and I think Arctos as well, they can export your data as Darwin Core archives and put them online. But not all of them can register the endpoint to GBIF, which is why Kat mentioned that maybe you may want to use an IPT for that, but there are other solutions as well. So I think only Symbiota and Earthcape, as far as I know, register the endpoint on GBIF, and Arctos doesn't do it automatically, but they work with VertNet to do it. And I don't know about the other collection management system, so if someone else is knowledgeable, they're very welcome to share additional insights. But if you already have an archive and it's already online, either because you're using a collection management system that generates such archive like Specify, or maybe you wanted to make your own archive because your university has a custom system or something like that, you can also consider registering endpoints to GBIF by using the registry API, the GBIF registry API. It won't help you generate archives. It won't put it online for you. It's just really registering the endpoint and telling GBIF where the dataset is. And we have a bit of documentation about that, and we have a whole video about it. I won't go into details unless we have questions, but you're very welcome to check this video. This is what this image is from, where I explain a little bit what are the advantages of using the API, why you may want to do it, and also what you need to do to make it work. I just want to add a side note. If you are currently using a system for publishing data on GBIF, but you're thinking about changing that system using a different installation, maybe you're on an IPT and you would like to now share data from Symbiota, for example, or maybe you had an IPT in the past and it went offline and you need to publish now your data from a different system. It's possible without having to recreate a new dataset on GBIF. We can just change the endpoint registered. So just have a different link to the data, but the dataset would remain the same on GBIF. So if you are trying to migrate your data from something to an APT, we have a little migration protocol. It's all explained. It's very easy to do. It will automatically change the endpoint and keep your dataset page on GBIF. If you want to change to a different type of installation, for example, one of the CMSs I've mentioned, you need to contact help desk or have access to the API. So, but we're here to help, so it shouldn't be a big problem. Right, so we've done how to share data on GBIF, and now I want to mention a little bit more of what happens next, right? When data goes on GBIF, and where does it end up? So the obvious place is when you share data on GBIF, you'll see your data on gbif.org, and it will also be accessible via the GBIF API. Datasets are searchable on gbif.org, but also all the occurrences are integrated in a central index and will be showing along all the other occurrences. This is an example of search across all preserved specimen of mollusks on GBIF with images in the US, I think. And the data is searchable and downloadable, and both on the website, but also on the API. But this is not the only place where your data will be visible. Maybe you're already familiar with the Global Registry of Scientific Collections, GRCycle. It's a registry of physical scientific collections, which was developed a long time ago by the Smithsonian Institution and was relatively recently adopted by GBIF, and we host it and maintain it at GBIF. It's also a repository of collection and institution codes and identifiers. And when possible, we link occurrence records from GBIF to collections and institutions in GRCycle. So this is an example of a collection page in GRCycle where you have like your collection described, but then you may have a lot of aggregated maps, statistics, metrics, things that come from occurrences published on GBIF. So the occurrences will show here as well, provided that you're using the same codes and identifiers that are available on GRCycle. As a side note, one advantage of updating the information in GRCycle is that you can write about not only everything that you put on GBIF or iDigBio that has been digitized, but you can also describe your collections that are not digitized or partially digitized. So it can be a good place also to be visible, not just if you have records, specimen records. Another place where your occurrences may show up, may be displayed is on what's called the GBIF hosted portals. So those are customizable websites that can show a subset of GBIF data. And this is an example from the BT Biodiversity Museum. It looks like a really nice website. You can browse the specimen records, you can browse the collections, for example. I mean, it's quite relatively flexible. You can decide what kind of data views you have, and you can definitely customize the aesthetic, I would say, the cosmetics of the website. It's free, and institutions can apply for hosted portals. If you're interested, I suggest that you look gbif.org/hosted-portals, and you can see if this is a good fit for you. It can remove a lot of the burden of having to maintain your own website. You can put news items there and still show your data at the same time. So it can be quite an interesting option for a lot of institutions. Yes. So this is like where the data can be accessed, but it's really a data lifecycle is a loop, right? And you go back to the original records, and there's a lot of information you can get back after you share your data with the world. So one thing, for example, is when GBIF interprets your data, we'll have a lot of automated flagging and issues that are detected. So this is an example where, for example, you can flag where records have coordinates that don't match the country provided. So those records are all supposed to be published in the US, but you can see that their coordinates say differently, and that's flagged automatically during the GBIF interpretation. And so once you publish on GBIF, you can perfectly go and explore your data with those flags and see where you may want to improve the data at the source. And so we have a bit of information. We have technical documentation here. We have a whole webinar about it. I can paste and send the link later. But yeah, we also have a whole summary of the GBIF automated flags. And one other thing, but it's really mentioned small, but if people are interested, I can elaborate, is that GBIF tries to identify related records. So if your specimen has the exact same catalog number, if your record has exact same catalog number as another record on GBIF and it's collected the same day, we say, and they have the same species, for example, we say, well, they're probably related. And sometimes it can be interesting because some people publish sequences to the National Nucleotide Archive, NCB, I cannot remember. Yes, big platform for sequences, NCBI, MBOL, and that data, or BOLD, for example, and that data can go back to GBIF, but it won't be published by the institutions themselves. So you may have a specimen record in your CMS, and then it becomes an occurrence record on GBIF, but you may not have the sequence associated with that specimen. But maybe someone else came one day, asked you for a sample and sequenced it and put it in one of those platforms and published it on GBIF. And now we're able to identify that those specimens are related. So you may be able to enrich to some degree your data with big grain of salt to take, because it's prone to errors. But, you know, something to think about. Yes. And also, of course, once you share your data on the platform online, you will have people who see your data, and they may also notice that there can be mistakes there. And a lot of them do provide us with feedback. We try to put all of that feedback in one repository on GitHub, but we also contact the original data providers every time. So to let them know that someone has noticed that you might have an incorrect identification, for example. And so that's another way to also help improve the data. But for that to work, we really need to make sure that the contact information we're given for a data set is up to date, and we actually have the name of the data manager or the curator, the people who can forward the message to the relevant people. And also, it's best if once you get that feedback, you're able to update the data then that you provide to GBIF. Yes, so that was the data lifecycle, but there are other benefits to sharing data, or at least there's a lot of you can demonstrate the use of your data to your founders once you have shared it on GBIF, because we have a few ways to track that information. So we keep track of all the downloads that are made by users, not necessarily searches, and also, of course, yeah, you have people who make bots that scrape the system. So it's impossible to get a full picture of everything that's happening, but we try. We try to track downloads on GBIF and to have the activity of a data set, like how many times records from the data set were included in the download somewhere. And so that activity is available on dataset pages, publisher pages. You can look at the activity in detail if you want, like in this screenshot here, but there is also the ability to download reports that give you monthly metrics for your downloads, of your data. And another thing that may be quite interesting is to look at citations of data. So Daniel, my colleague at the GBIF Secretariat, has a whole system to track when GBIF mediated data is cited in the scientific literature and also in some policy documents. And so we try to have that in a literature index. And the idea is that you can go to your dataset page and see how many times your data was contributing to one of those documents. And you can also click here and see that there are lots of stories that have been summarized by our communication teams of those publications making use of data. And once a year, they are all put together in one beautiful paper document that's called the Science Review that can also be downloaded in PDF. If you're interested, you can also use the citation widget, which is a widget that allows you to display how your data is cited on GBIF. Every time there's a new citation, automatically it will update your citation count and show which documents are citing the data. And it's really very helpful. It's an actual concrete use of the data, and it makes you see why it's helpful to share data with the world. Yes, and that's it. I put my email address here, but if you have any questions, we're still in the webinar, so you're very welcome to ask them now. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Kat and Marie. I think we do have one question. Somebody asked, can I get the link again for transferring previous data to another IPT endpoint?
Yes, I will. Should I send it in the chat or?
If you could drop it in the chat for everybody to see.
Yes, I will do that.
That's why I did that with all of the URLs from my presentation. I don't know if that might be worthwhile for you to do too. Just all of it. Just spam them.
Thank you so much. Yeah, better to have them than not.
I will put all the links now. Yes.
Perfect.
Excellent. And yeah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll go ahead and answer them. There's another question. Is the IPT hosted by iDigBio going away too? If so, are there any steps or special considerations those impacted will need to account for when moving a data set?
Okay. Yes, we cannot expect the iDigBio IPT to remain post iDigBio. We are working on a solution. I don't want to speak authoritatively on this, like with 100% authority, but we are working towards a solution. It's looking positive. Just sit tight. We'll let you know.
Thank you so much, Kat. Somebody asked, if I have my collection on Microsoft Access, how would I upload that data onto GBIF?
Who wants to take it? Marie, do you want to take it? Do I want to take
I got distracted when trying to paste links because I'm realizing I'm pasting it to the wrong place. Can you repeat the question again?
Of course, of course. The question is, if I have my collection on Microsoft Access, how would I upload that data onto GBIF?
So first, you need to format it to a format we can ingest, which I would advise Darwin Core archives. And I don't think Microsoft Access has any way to do that automatically or in any way that's yeah, it won't be smart enough to figure out how to do it. You need to manually look at all your columns in your database, and then you need to check if there is a Darwin Core term for it. And then once you know if there is a Darwin Core term for it, then it's basically a matter of formatting the data in this way. For example, in the IPT, you can connect your database to your IPT and then do the mapping, say, this column is that term, this column is that term, and so on. And then set it up so that it will create the archive automatically and register it on GBIF. If you're not familiar with Darwin Core and you don't know anything about Darwin Core terms and you don't know where to start, I think depending where you are, the best way is we put you in touch with the node and they can help you figure out which column is what, which field corresponds to which term in Darwin Core. But yeah, you have to have this formatting part. You cannot just natively connect your database to GBIF, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much, Marie. Let's see. We do have some questions rolling in. Thank you so much. The next question, do GBIF hosted portals include specimen image hosting?
No. So I can give you more. We have a whole blog post and also actually technical documentation that explains how sharing images on GBIF works, but it doesn't host images. In fact, even when you do share on an IPT, it doesn't host images. So you have to have your images hosted somewhere online, and what you provide to GBIF are the URLs to those images. So it's not a collection management system. It really, you have to, you can use some of those free access places to some degree, like Zenodo, for example, to host your images and provide URLs to GBIF, but the hosted portals don't actually host. Like what the hosted part of the hosted portal means that we host the infrastructure, but we don't actually host the data, if that makes sense. So unfortunately, yeah, it's a question we get often because it's always a problem to find space to store images, but this is not something we can provide.
Thank you so much for that answer. The next question, is there a date estimated or otherwise set for the iDigBio website being retired?
Gil or David? I feel like this is a question that y'all are better equipped to answer than I am.
So the iDigBio project officially ends currently on August 31st of 2026. We don't know what's going to happen right after that. We could have a no-cost extension from NSF and continue on a little bit if we have funds left. But I would, if I were in your boat, I would say look for August 31st, 2026 as the end of the iDigBio as we know it. And even if we get a no-cost extension, we're not sure what that might look like. So one of the reasons we're having this webinar today is for people to begin thinking about this so they have 8 or 9 months to figure out what they're going to do. We don't want to lose any of the data that are out there at this point. I also want to say, and Kat, correct me here, and Marie, but what Marie was talking about in terms of data from like an Access database or something like that, or an Excel web sheet or something. Can you make that connection through the IPT? I mean, you can actually say, I want this column to be that column and this column to be that column. You could do it
definitely.
through. Yeah, you could do it. You could take your Access database and export it as a Excel spreadsheet or something, and then I think you can bring up. Is that correct, Marie? And you can bring up the
yeah. So I mean, I even actually, I think it should work with Access, but I mean, in the IPT, if your institution is hosting the IPT, you can connect your database directly, and then you don't even need to have a like this intermediary sort of step of exporting to spreadsheet before you upload in the IPT. So the IPT supports direct database connection, but of course it has to be on the same server, right? Because otherwise it's a bit more challenging. But yeah, yes, definitely you can do it through the IPT. But the IPT won't figure out which column is what. So you still need to go and know what term is used for example, dates and so on. But yes.
The other possibility would be to export your data to a Symbiota portal. And I suspect that Katie will talk about that in a couple of weeks when they do the Symbiota webinar. And those folks have been very good and very helpful at getting people's data from one format to another and into Symbiota, and from there easily into GBIF.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Gil and Marie. And so we have one question in the queue. So if if the audience has any more questions, feel free to drop those in the chat, in the Q&A feature, excuse me. So the next question is In the past, I have had a case when working with data on GBIF. I kept the GBIF ID thinking these were stable. And then to my surprise, later on, none of these GBIF IDs matched. Are there recommendations to publishers to how to avoid updating data sets so GBIF IDs are not reset? I've heard there's been something in the works to help with that issue.
Yes, yes. So it's a good question. So your GBIF, the GBIF ID, an occurrence to a URL, no, sorry, a URL to an occurrence, the other way around. This depends on the combination of your data set published, which has a DOI, which is stable, and the occurrence ID that you are using. If you change the occurrence ID, meaning the identifier for a given record in your data set, then it will change the URL for GBIF, because the system cannot know that it's not a new record. It's not possible. So I'm going to paste in the chat. We have a blog post and we have a video that explains a little bit more how this works and how to avoid this. In general, if you're on the data use side and you're thinking of yourself just keeping track of things, I would suggest make a download. That's the best way, because the download is stored, especially if you cite it, and then you will have the record itself in the download, and it has a DOI. If you're, yeah, I think it's the best way. Just make a download. You will have it. You'll have a snapshot at that point in time. Yeah, but to avoid having this fluctuation of URLs and identifiers, I'll paste the relevant blog post and video.
Thank you so much, Marie. And while you post those, I'll go ahead and just ask the audience, that was the last question in the queue. I'll give it a couple minutes, a minute or two, if there's any other follow-up questions. I'll go ahead and call it then. I don't think any more questions are coming in, so I'll go ahead and give my ending spiel. So as with all iDigBio webinars, this is recorded and will be posted on our wiki page. I went ahead and dropped that in the chat function. I would just like to say thank you again to our speakers for coming today and answering all these questions. And I really appreciate taking the time out of your busy day, and we really appreciate it. So yeah, thank you everybody. And
Let me say just one more thing.
oh yeah, go ahead.
So Marie and Kat are the best helpers in the world, and they will give you time and help you figure out how to get things from where they are to where you want them to be in one of the systems. So getting something to iDigBio means you can easily get it to GBIF, and if you can get it to almost any other system, you can get it to GBIF. So just email these ladies, and they will help you out. They're what they're really experts at.
Thank you, Gil. You're too
Yes.
nice.
So just showing how awesome they are. So thank you all again, and I will go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you. Have a great day, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Bye.